3 News Now this week.
A little girl here in Omaha who is just learning to talk is facing a deportation hearing. Her family and her attorney are worried she's caught up in a legal battle that could see her sent out of the U.S. with no family by her side. Senior reporter Jake Wazakowski has this story you'll see only on 3.
This toddler, we'll call her Anna, just turned 2 years old and is facing deportation. Her father was stopped at the border, so she's now living with her uncle in Omaha. We're not identifying the girl or her uncle for their safety.
Y ella ya entiende todo, ya habla, juega, ya.
Okay, she understands now and she plays. She says, mom, dad and mom.
In May, her father was arrested for re-entry of removed alien and is still being held in Arizona. She was separated from him.
No goodbyes, just taken out of his arms, and that was that.
And taken to New York for months before having her immigration case transferred to Omaha so she could stay with family. Now they want to know why a 2-year-old is in deportation procedures.
To me, that's not good because she's a little girl. If she were 12, 13, 14 years old, she'd be able to understand, but she's a little girl.
Her attorney, Tom Campbell, wants to know how a 2-year-old is supposed to understand what's happening in court when she can barely talk.
I wish to be respectful, however, putting a 2-year-old in court to respond to charges when they can't even speak is barbaric and inhumane.
Court records indicate her father, who is from Guatemala, told the court he wanted to come back to Nebraska to make a better life for he and his daughter, and that he thought Central Americans could enter the U.S. with children.
What happens on a national level affects us in Nebraska. And as Nebraskans, I would hope that we can send a message to our leaders that we are better than this, that this is not who we are.
And his uncle hopes she can stay and get a good education in the U.S., or he'll be allowed to reunite her with her father instead of her being deported, possibly without her dad.
I try to play her father's role, but I could never be her father, so it's hard.
It's unclear when the young girl will have a hearing in immigration court here in Omaha. Her father could be deported in about a week. Reporting in South Omaha, Jake Wazakowski, 3 News Now.
Anna's father has pleaded guilty in federal court to re-entry of a removed alien. He is awaiting sentencing, which will likely be time served. We contacted ICE and are waiting to hear back.
There's no doubt that over the last 5 to 10 years, everybody involved in sports at every talent level has become more aware that a concussion is a serious injury, something most people just shrugged off in the past. Medical science is only so far along. There's still so much we don't know.
I cannot confidently tell you how having 1 versus 3 versus 10 concussions when you're young, how that's going to affect you 50 years from now. It makes sense, and we think that the more times you get hit in the head, it's probably worse for you.
Concussions have been a common football injury since the game began, but it hasn't been until recently that teams have taken them seriously. Now there's a clear protocol. Every team, from the NFL down to youth football, follows it. The focus? Keeping players from going back in early and getting a concussion on top of a concussion or second impact syndrome.
That's the stuff that people can actually die from.
Once an athlete is in it, they go through a series of milestones with no set time period. If it's a kid, those include feeling normal, completing a full day of school, then gradually completing a series of exercises. If they have no headaches, blurred vision, concentration problems, or any other symptoms, they're clear to play again. And while concussions happen the most in football, you can get them in almost any sport. An 11-year study that monitored high school athletes shows soccer players get them by far more than any sport other than football.
Most of the concussions in soccer are from running into another person or hitting your head on the ground.
But why did the sports world change so swiftly on concussions without any major research showing their effects? Well, multiple reasons, but a big one, suicides by high-profile NFL players, later revealed to have CTE, a degenerative brain disease caused by head trauma.
Anytime there's high-profile cases of, for example, CTE, once that is in the public eye, people want to know more about it.
But the connection between CTE and youth and high school sports is unclear. Every confirmed case has involved an NFL player.
Yeah, there haven't been any confirmed cases in younger populations that I'm aware of at this point in time.
Now, one thing you didn't get into it as much was the timeline. You know, back in the day, it used to be you'd get back out there playing right away, and now it's a little longer.
Right, as I mentioned, there's a clear protocol now, and so pretty much the minimum amount of time you can sit out a week is, or sit out is 7 days. So theoretically, a football player could get hurt on a Friday night and be back the next Friday night, but more likely it's going to be more like a 10 to 14 day span, so they might have to sit out even 2 weeks, and sometimes it's even longer. Sometimes the concussions are so bad where they might have to miss the whole season.
You know, and when it comes to this, a lot of times we're talking to the parents because they're the ones checking on their kids and making sure they're okay. What is the advice? You know, is there at some point when a parent should say, my kid needs to be done and retire from this sport?
Yeah, one thing I've learned in this series is you're going to get a range of answers when it comes to this stuff because there's just so much that we don't know right now. But the doctor that I talked to, Dr. Mathisen with Nebraska Medicine, said that it's when you start getting concussions when you really shouldn't be. So maybe your kid's walking down the hallway, his buddy comes up, pats him on the head, all of a sudden he has another concussion and he has to sit out of sport. So those type of signs are the ones where you really got to start evaluating, should I keep playing a physical sport or not?
Yeah, so definitely something where it's abnormal or over the top, you know, it's a little much. So you should check on that.
Exactly.
So the other thing we want to talk about is this series. You're going to be doing these stories all week long. Right. What can we expect coming up?
Well, over the next 2 days, I'm going to stick with youth football. I've always found it fascinating. I played back when I was a kid when I was in 5th grade, but they even Omaha even do it when they start in 3rd grade. So I was definitely fascinated by that. So the first one on Tuesday is going to be focusing on the players and the coaches. You know, like I mentioned, I played. It's changed a lot since I played in terms of their practice style, how physical things are compared to what they used to be. Coaches go through so much more training nowadays than they used to, as well as even the way they tackle. It was remarkable to me that it is literally the exact opposite way they tackle compared to what they do now. So yeah, that's going to be what we're going to hit on definitely on Tuesday.
And that's an important way to look at it. It's one of those things now that people are looking at it from every position. You have the coaches being trained on it, the parents are paying attention. It's something that's front and center really, and everyone's talking about.
Yeah, and we mentioned Tuesday, but on Wednesday we're going to get into the parent side of things too. And obviously these are the parents that are actually allowing their kids to play football. What was the thought process like? Some had to make compromises with their wives. Others, it was just no problem at all. So next few days are going to be interesting in terms of just the youth football aspect of things. But those numbers are still declining, which was interesting to me. But obviously, as you'll be able to tell at the practice, still plenty of kids out there playing football.
Yeah, still a popular sport.
Absolutely.
A lot of information there. Thanks so much, John.
Yep, thanks, Jenny. On the day the state announced that a Nebraskan has passed away from using vaping products, the Douglas County Health Department wanted to warn the rest of the state. Stop using them.
So really, there just isn't enough information to say that any of it is safe.
The Department of Health and Human Services said Monday it doesn't matter how old you are or if the products are flavored. This is just another incident in the last month or so across the country. And over at Acosta Vapes near 72nd and Q, they say they've lost about 30% of their business in the last few weeks. Owner Melissa Acosta isn't encouraging anybody to start vaping, but believes it's a safer option than smoking cigarettes.
You know, your taste buds come back, you can taste things better, you can breathe better. In the morning when you wake up, you're not hacking a lung up, for instance. You definitely don't get as tired when you're walking or going up the stairs and those sorts of things.
Most of the deaths reported involve vaping THC cartridges. While the health departments say both are dangerous, Costa says those products and what she sells are much different. She hopes customers realize that and come back.
I think it's really by trying to educate people and make sure that they understand what is going on.
And we don't know what kind of product the person who died used. Ann O'Keefe with the health department also says that they're looking into old medical records to see if there are previous unreported deaths caused by vapor products that they can later report. In studio, John Kipper, 3 News Now.
You know, it's pretty upsetting, and it's also baffling to me why anyone would think that this is a fun sport to go and watch.
A year-long investigation led the Nebraska Humane Society and Bellevue Police to this property on South 15th Street.
Located numerous roosters that are being used for cockfighting activities and cockfighting breeding, and we found various items of paraphernalia there as well.
The Nebraska Humane Society says they seized 163 birds from the property. Kelly Brown, Director of Field Operations at the Humane Society, compares this bust to the one in Cass County last November. Brown says the birds were living in horrible conditions.
There were quite a few birds that were housed inside of the barn area, and then in also outdoor coops. overall conditions weren't very acceptable either.
5 people were arrested and face felony charges.
I know that we eat chickens and we eat cattle and things like that, but when you're talking about putting an animal in a situation where its last moments on earth are going to be fighting for its life, fighting to the death of the other animal.
They also seized 4 dogs, 4 kittens, and a goat from the same property for animal neglect. The birds they saved?
Right now they're being held at an undisclosed location. We're just doing our daily care with them. It's pretty difficult to rehome a rooster just because it is going to try to go after other birds.
And for anyone who's involved in any kind of animal fighting, Brown says,
just know that in Nebraska we take this very seriously. It is enforced very strictly, and if you're involved, you're eventually going to be arrested.
In Bellevue, Sydney Gray, 3 News Now.
The Humane Society also tells us if you see something, say something. They say there's no reason anyone should be harboring a large number of birds if they aren't a meat producer. Animal fighting is against the law in all 50 states, a felony here in Nebraska.
This 2-year-old girl was separated from her father at the border in May. He was detained for re-entry of a removed alien. The child, only 1 at the time, was moved to New York State and recently allowed to live with her uncle here in Omaha while she goes through deportation procedures in immigration court. Her attorney says she doesn't understand what's going on and is only starting to learn how to speak.
It's really unacceptable. It's reprehensible.
Who's going to interpret for her? Dora the Explorer? Like, what are we doing?
2 prominent Democrats, both looking to challenge Representative Don Bacon in District 2, Ann Ashford and Cara Eastman, say the policy needs to change. Ashford feels anger and sadness that we've gotten to this point with children and says we need sensible immigration reform, but have to keep families seeking refuge together.
We need to stop separating families at the border. The fact that she was sent to another state with no connection first, that's unacceptable. We need to stop separating those families at the border, and we need to find a way to humanely house them as they're going through the process.
In a statement, Congressman Bacon said in part, quote, "We're glad the child was able to be united with family members while her attorney works through the legal process. Unfortunately, too many children like this suffer the consequences of decisions made by parents, and in this case, by a father who has been caught violating the law for a second time." Eastman was recently at the border watching immigration hearings and says deportees keep coming back because of how awful their countries are and they don't know border policies have changed. She feels Bacon is blaming the father and promoting hate towards immigrants instead of helping figure out a solution.
Policies. I also know that people want secure borders and they want us to have a system that works for everybody. But there is not one voter in this district that is telling me they think this is a good practice or that they would agree with something so despicable.
Reporting in Omaha, Jake Wazakowski, 3 News Now.
It's unclear when the 2-year-old child will have a deportation hearing.
The Omaha Area Youth Football League has changed to lessen head injuries, but both the players and coaches know that it's a violent game where anything can happen.
And we don't hit as much as we used to. There's no doubt about it. Hey, you gotta contain over here, man.
Ryan McDonald has been coaching youth football for 11 years and played high school and college ball. When he started coaching, they practiced tackling a lot.
We don't go to the ground all the time anymore, which is what we used to do quite a bit.
He says they've changed for the better. Coaches are required to go through hours of training before the season. They now focus on fundamentals over physicality. They also hit 2 to 3 times less in practices, something that has carried over on game day.
There's a lot of arm tackling going on today, and it shows. You know, you watch game film and it certainly shows.
Across the practice field, one of the 8th grade teams is coached by Robert Glantz. He's had to adjust to the new way of playing.
It's changed considerably, and it's been somewhat of a challenge for someone who played football for a long time back in the day to change that mindset a little bit.
He says when he played, defenders were taught to lead with the head, something that will get you a penalty now. Nowadays, they teach kids a rugby-style way of tackling.
It used to be tackle in front of the guy, and now it's tackle behind the guy.
And that's something the Seattle Seahawks use when they won a Super Bowl.
Basically saying, here's an NFL team that won the world championship, and they're using these techniques so we can go all the way down to youth football, and they're fine, and you can still get the results that you're looking for.
With the game being played safer, the kids on the field say they rarely, if ever, see a concussion during a game or practice. And they certainly don't worry about them.
Do you worry about getting a concussion at all ever?
No.
Don't think about it.
The two coaches we spoke with agree. With the modern equipment and revamped gameplay, football is not that dangerous of a sport.
Playing football is much safer than what the media wants to put out there. You get an injury, they're going to blow that injury up tremendously, whereas kids are riding skateboards, riding their bike every night going to the ER with head injuries or broken bones, but that isn't a popular news story.
Now, John, one thing I wanted to ask more about, you talked about how coaches have changed in terms of their training. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I guess I want to start out with, first of all, youth football is very, very unregulated. It's pretty much to each individual league to how they want to handle things. Now, thankfully, Omaha, the Omaha Metro has really consolidated things. So what they're doing in Millard, they're also doing in Papillion, etc. And so what they're doing is they're making their coaches take 7 hours worth of training before the season even starts. And this isn't just the head coaches that we just heard from. This is every single assistant. If you're going to help out on the practice field, you're taking 7 hours of training through USA Football. So it's pretty intense. As you might imagine, that's pretty time consuming. And so a few people told me, like, look, we might have lost a few guys because they just didn't have time to do this before the season. But overall, with everything that we're talking about with how dangerous concussions can be, they have to do it, and it's certainly worth maybe losing a coach or two.
Sure, something they're making a priority for sure. Now, when you look at NFL hits, college hits, even high school hits, you have big, strong guys hitting each other hard. You can see almost when you have that type of impact. The hits at this level, I have to imagine, aren't as rough.
By no means. And the league director even has a quote that says, third and fourth graders, which is where they start them at, it's like pillow fighting. And so obviously you're not going to get an incredibly amount of very hard hits with that. So the 8th grade coach who we talked to, he says he's kind of been through every level and he's only seen 1 in 11 years. So not a lot. And that league director I mentioned had both of his kids go through the league and says he just remembers 1 or 2 of them. So obviously they're not happening a ton, which is a good thing, but it's football. It can still happen. Yeah,
for this story, you talked to a few kids. You showed a couple of them there. Is this something they're talking about, thinking about their kids?
Yeah, 8th graders, 13-year-old boys don't really care much about a lot of things, and they want to play tackle football. They want to get out of flag football because they want to hit other boys. And so, no, to answer your question, they really shook it off. They didn't give very long answers when I asked them why. They just kind of was almost confused why I was there. Like, what? Concussions? It just isn't a really big deal to them. And they mentioned in a lot of the games and practices, and these were 8th graders, so a lot of them have been playing since 3rd grade. They say they rarely, if ever, have seen a concussion.
Yeah, and you can speak on that because, you used to be an 8th grade
boy.
I sure did. So, okay, 2 stories down. What can we expect for the rest of the week?
Okay, so we're sticking with youth football tomorrow. We're talking specifically to the parents. So it's much more narrowed tomorrow because, as you know, every parent in Omaha area, every parent in the country is really evaluating if my kid wants to play football, do I let them? The parents I talked to let their kids play football. They really didn't have a problem with it for the most part. And I even talked to a former Husker football player who's a pretty well-known guy. He, as you might imagine, had a unique perspective on things. So that was certainly interesting. And yeah, every parent, as I kind of mentioned, was a little bit different in their reasoning on why they decided to let their boy play.
Okay, look forward to the future coverage. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jenny.
You really felt like when you're a student athlete here that there was dozens and hundreds of people on campus that had your best interest at heart, and we're going to do everything to help you be the best you can be. Be honest, we've fallen behind a few people in a couple of those areas. It's great to see the state of Nebraska and some of the people that are going to contribute to this that we're grateful to decide that we want to get back to a point that we're giving our student athletes the best of the best.
Kayla Latham lived in this apartment complex, but was suddenly given 30 days notice to get out.
It was just total devastation.
Struggling to find movers, pay for the moving expenses, and just the burden of relocating with a broken shoulder and a disability took a toll on Michaela.
I didn't plan on moving. I planned on dying in that apartment. And then to be forced to move because you're low income, and then you work very hard to try to find people to move you, and then the day of, it doesn't happen.
Her movers bailed on her Sunday, which was her deadline. Living with her aunt in the meantime, they were both praying for a miracle, someone to help them move out. And that's when Raymond Crawford gave her the call that he'll move her out for free after reading her story on 3newsnow.com.
owning a business and being in the same situation that she's been in before. As a kid, I grew up in Section 8 and housing, stuff like this, and it's just unfortunate that we're able to give back to them and be able to help them out, and do something for them in a time of need.
Crawford and his employees came first thing in the morning to move her from Bellevue to La Vista, saying it was a rainy day at work, so why not help somebody? Michaela and her aunt say Crawford was an angel sent to them.
There is a God, and these people were really needed.
And as for Michaela, she's excited to start fresh with her service dogs.
I see a great big pot of gold at the end of it. It's not a dark tunnel anymore.
A life changed by just one phone call. Michaela and her aunt saying they can't begin to express their gratitude, but they'll pay this good deed forward. Reporting in Bellevue, Corinne Hafuda, 3 News Now.
The Bellevue Berry Farm is a popular place for pumpkins and hayrides. But this past Sunday, flooding forced the farm to close.
That's the first time we closed because we thought it was going to be too slippery and wet to run the hayride.
Ed Schaefer is the owner of the 80-acre farm.
Water was backed up all the way back into there. This was all wet here.
Wet and muddy conditions aren't ideal for this business.
So yeah, it's the kind of business where people got to come out and be able to enjoy it and be outside.
Luckily, there was no damage.
He was wet, but he's working now.
Another part of the business here is the pumpkin patch. Some of the pumpkins got muddied over, so the farm had to move them to a different spot and is now in the process of cleaning off all the pumpkins.
And the pumpkins that are low we're cutting, we always have to cut them and roll them.
The farm pumped out 1,000 gallons a minute for 48 hours and is now dry.
It's a little muddy. Yeah, but the tractors can get through it.
Scary for the owners, maybe. But Bellevue Berry Farms is back on its feet.
I learned you always got to think positive, Even if it's raining, you got to say, it's all right.
Reporting in Papillion, Phil Bergman, 3 News Now.
You just kind of swing it almost like if you were swinging a towel, but you got to keep your arm, you got to keep your
hand.
hand.
Swing a towel? Who swings a towel?
Like you just gotta keep your palm down and your wrist more open.
It's called team roping.
The header would catch the horns and turn him left, and the heeler comes in and ropes the feet, and whenever he dallies around his saddle horn and his ropes are tight, and the time stops.
18-year-old Coy Rallman has been doing it for years.
Uh-oh.
And it's a lot harder than it looks. Why is it twirly McGigging right
Well, I would step about right here.
Well, now I can touch it.
Right. I reckon the closer you get, the better your outcome usually is, no matter who you are.
How much time do you put into practicing?
Every day. It's nice. My college classes are all online. I wake up every morning at 5:30, start saddling horses and rope and practice all day.
Coy is just one of hundreds of men and women competing for a spot in the National Finals Rodeo, or NFR.
The top 15 in every event go to Las Vegas the first week in December.
Those top 15 people come from competitions across the country. Whoever has the highest score gets one of the 15 spots for each event. The events include things like team roping, bull riding, and steer wrestling. How big of a deal is it to end up there?
Big deal. If you've made the NFR, you are the very top of the line.
And even if you're not a natural. Dang it! Coy says everyone can appreciate a good rodeo.
It kind of shows off the Western way of life, and honestly, a lot of these events kind of go back to the days of when they were cowboys and they had to do this to doctor their cows or doctor their horses or whatever. And so I think it's neat.
The National Finals Rodeo is in Las Vegas in December, and I think I got the horn twice and just one horn. It is so much harder than it looks.
Well, you still did a good job.
Well, thank you. Maybe someday, maybe 10, 20 years from now,
I'll
be able to get one.
Yeah, I've got to practice like Coy. He said every day.
For hours and hours and hours. Lots of commitment there.
Yeah, a lot of good dedication. Well, awesome, great event.
Yeah.
A young girl who turned 2 in June can't tie her shoes or say her own name. We'll have a court hearing in Omaha on whether or not she should be deported. In May, she was with her father when he was arrested for felony re-entry. Since then, the girl has been separated from her dad, moved to New York State for months, and now in Omaha with an uncle who doesn't want to be identified for his safety.
Para cuidar una niña y una niña se acostumbra con su papá.
She suffers for her father's love because a father knows how to care for their own child.
Both the Immigration Court and U.S. Immigration and Citizenship Services told us to contact ICE. Immigration and Customs Enforcement responds to 3 News Now. Quote, for privacy reasons, ICE does not release any information about juveniles. However, when aliens illegally enter the United States with their foreign-born children, all family members are placed into removal proceedings. ICE continues to focus its enforcement resources on individuals who pose a threat to national security, public safety, and border security.
It's not a great situation, especially for kids, obviously.
Kevin Reuser, a professor of immigration law at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, says the law hasn't changed, but the way the law is handled has. Previously, he says they used prosecutorial discretion to only go after people with criminal histories or who have been removed before. Often, children were not prosecuted or put on an inactive docket. Since January 2017, he says discretion has been eliminated, so everyone is prosecuted.
What's happened is by making everyone a priority, then there are no priorities at all, and so the resources get spread thin.
He adds now some civil deportation hearings are being scheduled in 3 years. Previously, people going through removal proceedings were allowed to come into the U.S. with their kids while awaiting their decision. Now they're being detained.
I know that people who are worried about this say, well, if we let them into the interior, they're not going to show up for their court date, and we'll lose them, and they'll be gone. I understand that fear. The statistics don't bear it out.
Professor Reuser would like to see the politics taken out of immigration court since it falls under the Attorney General's Department and be allowed to run more like the judicial system. Jake Wazakowski, 3 News Now.
So here at the Missouri River, water levels aren't expected to hit flood stage just yet, but farmers from both sides of the river tell us that they're still feeling the effects of the floods 6 months later. And Iowa State leaders say now is the time to start building up and preparing for the next flood.
And the Corps talks about maybe kind of sort of opening the gates a little bit more. I'm worried. I am really worried.
Like so many others across Iowa and Nebraska, Carol Vinton says she has serious concerns about levee systems along the Missouri River.
Right now the winter is around the corner. We have families that they want to know where are they going to go? What are they going to do? Because they did not have time to plan. This water came in at such a fast rate.
Iowa Congressman Steve King, Representative John Jacobson, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers met with stakeholders. Many are local farmers who are still dealing with the effects of the March floods.
They want to do more than vent. They want to fix this problem so their children and grandchildren can hang on to the land that they own today and not have to be faced by the floods that they've been suffering, multiple floods over the last especially decade.
The goal was to bring everyone together in hopes of developing a better plan for future flooding. U.S. Army Corps of Engineer Colonel John Hudson.
Our #1 priority is life safety in the system, and we encourage everybody to continue to stay in contact with their local emergency management folks to ensure they know what's going on their section of the river, because it varies quite a bit depending on where you are in the river.
Colonel Hudson says the Corps has been approaching the problem in 3 phases: closing active breaches, restoring systems, and looking at how systems can be improved in the future.
They can expect, as we discussed here today, continued high flows in the river as we get room in our flood storage for next spring. So we need to get down to the base of our flood storage pool here before the system freezes in December.
The river will not handle the water like it used to.
I don't know what else to say. I'm pretty frustrated with this whole thing. They ran the river so low this winter I could walk across it.
Vinton says she appreciated the meeting and hopes government officials will do their job to help people still in need.
Our legislator has to know it's from the top. They got to tell our Corps guys, you've got to speed this up.
And Jenny, we talked to several farmers today, and many of them had similar concerns. And a lot of them have said it's not a matter of if the next flood will occur, but when that next flood is going to happen. Reporting live from the Missouri River, Sydney Gray, 3 News Now.
Now, when I spoke with these 3 dads, all of them had different football experiences and came to the decision in a different way. But all their sons are playing youth football.
Gets the snap, looking left, pump fakes, double move, throws to the end zone. Kenny's out there, comes back, makes a catch.
It's been less than 10 years since receiver Brandon Kenny was lighting up secondaries for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. When he played, the attitude on concussions was a tad different than nowadays.
I feel like it was like, go to the sideline, take a knee, are you all right? Okay, come back in, type of thing. So, and it was, especially if you were one of those players that always wanted to play, you didn't want to hear anything like, I'm sitting out, there's no way, I'm going right back in.
Now Kenny has a different perspective. His kid plays on the 3rd grade team for the Millard Junior Wildcats. Kenny even helps coach. It wasn't necessarily an automatic decision to let him play.
I mean, it was something that I thought about after leaving football because, you know, with so many things that's going on with the sport, being a violent sport and concussions and things like that, you think about it.
But after some thinking, it was an easy choice.
And I was at that like, look, how can I tell him no and I play football? So it was one of those things that was an easy decision. It was kind of exciting for him to know like, hey, you want to go out and play football? Let's work and go do it.
In other families, it was about making a deal. For Mike Wilburn, he bought a specific helmet so his wife would agree to let their son play in the 3rd grade.
I actually shelled out, what it took to get a Vices helmet after all the research was going on about the helmet technology, so we kind of compromised in that area.
Others, like Don Ricketts, says it makes sense to start your kids early. That's how they can learn the game and gradually get more physical.
I can't even imagine my son starting now in 8th grade as his first year. Kids are getting bigger, kids are getting faster, and not having some of that, those fundamentals that he's learned through the years, I think it would be a very difficult transition.
Team director Jeff Merkley says concussions don't happen much with the younger kids anyway.
3rd grade, 4th grade, it's pretty much like pillow fighting. There's a lot of bumping around. The kids aren't really hitting real hard. As they get older, they start hitting harder.
Now, these parents told me they put a lot of trust in the coaches. One thing that gives them comfort is that the league tries to keep coaches with the kids every year through 8th grade. Reporting in the studio, John Kipper, 3 News Now.
I've talked to football parents in the past and gotten the sense, did you get the sense that some of them feel this is a little overblown, in fact?
Yeah, you definitely do. And, some are certainly worried about this. You just saw the one parent that had to make the compromise with his wife to buy a nicer helmet in order to put their kid in 3rd grade. And some are completely the opposite, though. One guy told me that he thinks flag football is actually more dangerous because there's no protection at all. Kids could bang heads. And the league director actually told me he thinks the hype on concussions is a little bit out of control, but that they still take them very, very seriously, that they're not going to mess around. So you get a wide spectrum of parents and just people within the league saying different things on it.
And now the parents who are worried, when they're sitting on the sidelines watching these hard hits, what gives them comfort as they're going through this?
Well, as we mentioned yesterday, there's actually, at least from what we can tell, not a ton of concussions in youth football. They don't hit as hard. It's not as many as, say, high school or college, but they still are certainly there. Another thing that gives parents comfort, at least with what the Millard Football League is, obviously each league is a little bit different, but a coach will start with the group in 3rd grade, and he'll go to 4th grade, 5th grade, he'll accelerate up until they're done in 8th grade. So by the end of it, you've been with the coach over half a decade at that point. You have a lot of trust in what he's doing, and if obviously things went wrong, you can maybe switch up the coaches at some point. So that's what I heard, is they like the fact that the coaches stick with them, and they like their coaches in general.
Now, you talked about how these concussions are rare. Is there any thought, though, these are young developing brains, any thought that it might be worse for a young child to get a concussion?
Yeah, we're going to get into this a little bit on Friday, but where we focus kind of on the scientific side where we are now. But it looks like there's kind of 2 series of thoughts, and as you might imagine, there's no clear yes or no answer on this yet. The two schools of thought are essentially, one, yes, this is a developing brain, and it jumbles up the brain that can't be good for some kid that is developing. But the other school of thought is, well, this is a brain that is developing. It's malleable. It can move around a little bit. It might be able to take the hits a little bit better than, an NFL player with an adult brain that is fully developed. So time will tell on that, I guess.
Would you say at this point this is a major conversation point for parents?
At least the ones I talk to, and again, I'm thinking of parents on the sidelines. They're not really talking about, is Johnny going to get a concussion today or things of that nature. The one parent told me that they're much more worried about the game itself, the strategy, how the kids are developing, than whether or not their kid is actually going to get physically hurt or not. That's, I think, something that they're probably just trying to not think about, quite frankly.
Week-long series. What can we expect next?
Tomorrow we are looking at high school football. This is kind of what prompted the series in the first place, is I knew that high school numbers have gone down. We got the official numbers. It looks like they've gone down about 18% in the last 15 years. So clearly kids are playing less football. Now, is it just on concussions? I guess you'll never really know for sure, but it's certainly hitting the high school game a little bit, and we're going to explore that. We're going to explore that topic. I went to an Omaha high school, and they're doing things differently that even surprised me when I showed up to practice. So that's what we're going to focus on tomorrow.
Look forward to that. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Jenny.
So we are outside of the new dining space here in Exurban. Very exciting. It's going to be the first one here in Omaha.
Yeah, no, I think so. It's the first one.
So it starts outside.
So this is an entertainment zone, so we are actually able to seat and have activities out here, and people can have their drinks at this operable bar and stay outside, or bring food from inside and come outside. So.
All right, let's head inside. We'll take a look. What is the concept of Interrail?
So this is a food hall, right? But the difference between this and some other venues is that this is geared specifically toward food and beverage, making it kind of like having a real destination of its own. Like, no one's coming here to go shopping elsewhere, or no one's stopping over here to go elsewhere. And perhaps they are at some point, but this really is the destination point.
Now, what kind of restaurants are you going to be having? I saw burgers and tacos.
Right. Well, we can go through the list. So, Briggs Bean is a new concept to Omaha. There is coffee that's been sourced out of a company that's from Chicago, and they're roasting the beans here, which is really awesome. So it smells great here. So this is the Kathmandu Momo Station guys. They have a place in Blackstone right now. These guys do Burmese ramen and Nepalese dumplings. Really awesome.
Next up, B Squared Burger.
This is a burger concept that's actually based originally out of New York, but the first of its kind here in Omaha. So he's got a very simple burger. It's well-sourced, local beef, really good.
You can also find crepes here at Sofra Creperie.
The owners are from Albania, but he's lived here for the last 20 years. And he brought his cousin, who's from Albania also. And so they're really doing a European-style crepe that are savory and sweet, but they also have breakfast.
Akhtar Nawab has his own restaurant, ACTQ.
This is our kind of fast casual, you know, really focused concepts. So we blend a little bit of Indian into our Mexican, and it's kind of a different take, yeah.
Nawab even showed us one of his dishes that will start being serving on Thursday. Like almost like a little flatbread taco.
Exactly, yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. Nolan's Pizzeria will also be inside of Inner Hall.
He has like a water filtration system that kind of likens it to New York water, so he gets that crispy chewiness to the.
Nothing like New York pizza.
It's really kind of interesting. This is an ice cream shop. It's really just serving soft serve. We do 2 flavors a week.
Oh, cool.
And we change it every week. Banh mi shop. It's banh mi sandwiches, which are Vietnamese sandwiches, and French baguettes. So she makes that bread on premise at her other location, and she brings some of that over here. And then she also has bubble tea.
The hall also has a bar which serves both inside and outside with its retractable doors.
We really have gone out of our way, I think, to make it as unique and special as possible. It does definitely give an experiential kind of point of or perspective, I think, that you don't necessarily get from one single location.
Well, each year we celebrate National Hispanic Heritage Month from September 15th to October 15th, celebrating the histories, cultures, and contributions of American citizens whose ancestors came from Spain, the Caribbean, Central and South America, and Mexico. Now, to help celebrate, we have Alexis Robles y sus Caballeros, which means gentlemen, a local mariachi band. Alexis, Mauricio, and Emmanuel, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, of course. Now, you guys have been together in a band for about 6 years now. Tell me a little bit about your band.
Okay, so I am dating this handsome cowboy here.
Oh, okay.
And the other handsome cowboy there is my best friend. So
Awesome.
We've been together playing in different mariachi groups and decided one day, hey, why don't we just do something, just the 3 of us? And it's been a big hit so far. So we're just continuing to do gigs here and there. So
very nice. Now, mariachi is originally from Mexico. Tell me a little bit about the background of mariachi and the music that you guys play.
So it's kind of a hazy history, I guess. We don't really know exactly the date when it originated, but around in the 1800s, maybe 1860s, 1880s, You get these mariachi cowboys. They just started making their own, these Mexican cowboys, ranchers. They started making their own instruments, and after a long day's work, they just started playing, and out by the campfire, just started making their own music. And it just went off from there. They started making different instruments, like this right here is the guitarrón, which is unique to Mexico. And they just kept going, and the attire, usually what we're wearing, it originates from those ranchers, which is kind of what they wore. And the mariachis, they kind of took that attire and they just blinged it out, and now we're shiny.
Yeah, now you're kind of shining, now you're blinging, absolutely.
Real bling bling.
They're the bling bling, absolutely. Now, do you guys do a lot of performances here in Omaha?
Yeah, most of our performances are here in Omaha. A lot of private parties, like quinceañeras. You'll see a mariachi in your typical quinceañera or wedding. So yes, we do.
Or that's early in the morning too.
Yeah, this morning.
Believe
Very
it or not,
common.
People pay us to wake them up. Yeah.
And let's do the little serenade. A lot of people.
Serenata,
Awesome. We're going to serenade Mark and Courtney a little bit after the show. So now, thank you guys again for being here. So before we head off to break, you guys are going to play us a little something for us. What song will you guys be playing?
We're going to be singing the song La Malagueña.
Oh, okay. All right. You guys can go ahead and wake us up.
Qué bonitos ojos tienes debajo de esas dos cejas, debajo de esas dos cejas. Qué bonitos ojos tienes. Ellos me quieren mirar, pero si tú no los dejas, pero si tú no los dejas, ni siquiera
si por pobre me desprecias. Yo no te ofrezco riqueza, te ofrezco a mi corazón, te ofrezco a mi corazón a cambio de mi pobreza.
Bring me out. Can you introduce me as Joker?
The highly anticipated film The Joker starts showing today, but authorities like the U.S. military and police nationwide call this film a potential threat, which could inspire some to act dangerously, just like the Joker's character does. The Joker depicts a mentally unstable man who acts out with violence, something we've seen with real-life mass shooters, including James Holmes, the Aurora, Colorado movie theater shooter. He killed 12 people in the midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises. Now, some in Omaha say this movie shouldn't be watched by some people.
If they have a mental illness, they probably shouldn't go see a movie like that. Maybe the people around them, so keep them from seeing a movie like that.
Individuals are different, so some are able to discern violent behavior as inappropriate and others are not.
Leading up to the movie premiere, an email circulated by the HQ Army Material Command says some posts on social media have made references to involuntary incel extremists who replicate the behavior of the 2012 Aurora shooter. Defining incels as people who lack social skills and saying they idolize violent individuals like mass shooters and the Joker character. However, Joaquin Phoenix, who plays the Joker in the movie, says the movie has no responsibility for how it may provoke people.
You have somebody that has that level of emotional disturbance. I think that they can find fuel anywhere.
After all the controversy, Warner Brothers released a statement saying they've been longtime supporters of victims of violence and have called on policymakers to enact bipartisan legislation to address gun violence. And they say neither the character or the film endorses real-world violence of any kind. And in the meantime, police urge moviegoers to be aware of their surroundings when going to see The Joker. Some movie theaters are going as far as posting special Joker movie posters stating the rough language, brutal violence, and overall bad vibes. In studio, Corinne Hafuda, 3 News Now this morning.
Those involved in high school football say the game is safer than it's ever been, but participation numbers have been dropping for some time.
In part 4 of our series, we're exploring concussions and how football has changed to prevent them. And we're looking at high school football today.
Reporter John Kipper explores how the game has changed to prevent injuries and specifically with concussions.
When Omaha Ron Colley coach Tom Cassing was playing the game, concussions were no big deal. In fact, he says he's had 7 of them. But times are changing, and high school football is changing with them.
Here we go.
It's a different time.
It is night and day.
Omaha Ron Colley head coach Tom Cassing has had to make changes to the way he coaches and practices.
Offensive ending! Offensive ending! Get a drink on your way, let's go move!
That includes buying guardian caps for every member on the team to use during practice.
It's kind of like a pillow, it's a barrier, and when somebody else has that barrier, it softens the blow.
It's nice because you can still play kind of free while not, suffering the consequences.
Now they take them off for games, but at $40 a pop, seems to be money well spent.
We only had 1 concussion last year in practice, and the kid wasn't wearing his guardian cap. At least it gives me a peace of mind. I'm doing something.
And even when the caps are off, the headwear is better than it ever has been. Looking at the two, it's clear that the new helmets are much safer than they used to be.
I probably wouldn't let my kid play if it was that old technology. There's a ton of new technology. There are companies that are making a ton of money off of making kids safer.
Tackling is also different, with defenders no longer aiming to put their head in front of the ball carrier. And that's not all that's changing. The attitudes of those on the field on Friday night just aren't what they were 20 years ago.
Your teammates are responsible for it, your coaches are responsible, but also yourself. Because at the end of the day, nobody can tell you if you have a headache. It's got to be you.
Changes clearly needed to be made to keep the game alive. Over the last 15 years, kids playing high school football in Nebraska has dropped by over 18%. And from 2013 to last year, it's seen a decrease of around 11%.
And then the game was under attack a little bit. That's when participation numbers really dipped.
The Nebraska Schools Activities Association, under the umbrella of the national organization, has made significant changes over the last few years. That includes at the beginning of the season, forcing teams to not tackle until they practice for most of the week. There's also contact limits during the season.
The old days of contact day after day has been proven to be dangerous.
They've also changed up kickoffs and strictly enforced helmet-to-helmet tackles and other hits that leave players vulnerable to a concussion, all with the hope the game sticks around for a long time.
You know, some people feel like, where's the game going to be in 5 years? Are we going to have the game in 10 years? I'm confident that we will.
Our cross-country numbers have risen by 18% since 2013. It's unclear if that has a direct correlation to the declining football numbers. Reporting in the studio, John Kipper, 3 News Now.
Here now with reporter John Kipper, who's been putting on this concussion series all week long. And John, today you stuck with high school football.
Yes, ma'am.
You were talking about how rules have changed. What specifically is different now?
Well, there's a series of essentially penalties that they are very much more enforcing than, say, what they did 10 years ago when I was playing. So helmet-to-helmet hits I mentioned in the piece, that's pretty self-explanatory. Targeting, when you specifically lead with your head, that in some leagues will get you ejected. That won't get you ejected in high school football, but they'll call a penalty for that. Hitting a defenseless player when they're not ready for you and you hit them, or a blindside block when you don't use your hand specifically. All these things are now going to give you 15-yard penalties. And as you might imagine, a frustrated parent, a frustrated fan, they don't always like these calls, but the NSA official I talked to said that really at the time when they were making these, they felt like the game was at a crisis and they had to do something, and so that's what they did essentially, and it clearly does make the game safer. One more thing I wanted to mention with that, kickoffs as well, they changed, so you can't get as much of a head start when you're going off on a kickoff team that you used to.
Okay, you were showing the helmets and how there's so much more padding in them. Is that something that's mandated, regulated, or is that on the school?
It's on the school, and essentially, I mean, pretty much every school has gone that route in terms of you want to get the safest equipment, you want the most kids to play football, you're going to have to get the best gear. That being said, they are under some mandate because every 10 years they have to completely change the helmet out. That's just the rules. So you can only have them for 10 years. So as the years keep progressing, the helmets are just going to get better because they have to buy new ones.
One thing that was interesting, we're seeing there the cap over the helmet there. Is that something, when can we expect to maybe see that in a game?
I guess you don't know for sure. The Coach Cassing, the Ron Colley coach who we spoke with, said he wishes they were implemented yesterday. The player, Jack Doetzler, who we talked to, who plays quarterback for them, says as long as we can make them as cool as our helmets currently look, he's all about them. But really the more formal answer is it's all about a process, and you have to go through the NSAA, and the schools eventually all have to agree that, yes, that's something they want to do.
In your piece, you showed the graph that showed how football numbers are down. Are other sports picking up the pace of that?
Yeah, cross country really sticks out. From 2003 on, kind of when we started doing those numbers, they picked up 18% since then. But you got to be careful because the girls' cross country has also increased as well.
Sure.
But looking at the numbers a little more closely, the last 5 to 10 years, the boys have outpaced the girls in terms of the cross country rise. So there clearly is something there, but it's hard to say if that exactly correlates to less people playing football going to cross country.
Sure, it doesn't explain the exact reason for sure, but definitely interesting. Okay, final story is tomorrow. What are we looking at?
I know, final story. We went to Lincoln, the University of Nebraska Center for Brain Biology and Behavior. They monitor football and soccer players, specifically the Huskers, both teams for that, and they're doing something that no other college in the country is doing with their brains, essentially.
I've seen a little bit about it, and fascinating story. Looking forward to that one. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Jenny.
And you can find more about concussions, high school football, and their impact on the overall game on our website, 3newsnow.com.
Near 72nd and Pacific, you'll find one of Omaha's first Mediterranean restaurants, El Basha Mediterranean Grill, a place whose cuisine is focused around freshness. Within the walls of El Basha Mediterranean Grill, you can find a unique cultural dining experience.
We're gonna top it with the tahini sauce.
For over a decade, Ahmad Nabulsi and his family have been bringing their traditional Mediterranean dishes inspired from their Lebanese roots to Omaha.
It's mostly kebab, you know, grill, you know, fresh, salad, lean meat, lamb, you know. Yeah, we don't do steaks and stuff. We do little seafood dishes.
How does a Middle Eastern restaurant do in Omaha? Do you feel like people...
I mean, we started 15, 20 years ago, barely people know what's hummus.
Yeah.
But now hummus everywhere, like cup food. I mean, you go to Whole Foods, everywhere.
Right.
Hummus. It's becoming very, very popular with the Mediterranean diet, and it's very kind of healthy food.
So someplace my trainer may be okay with me eating.
Well, if your trainer come here, then he'll tell you this is the only place you need to go.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'll have to bring him here so I can eat here more often.
Yeah.
Their dishes are focused on fresh ingredients like sumac, tahini sauce, mint, cilantro, lemon, and herbs. Here, their meats are lean, like the beef shawarma, a traditional Middle Eastern dish.
I mean, we probably the only one in Omaha who do the beef shawarma.
Oh, okay.
It's becoming very popular.
You ever tried shawarma? There's a shawarma joint about 2 blocks from here. I don't know what it is, but I want to try it.
It's a popular place for those repeat customers like Don Larson, who comes at least once a week.
Often as I can, but don't tell my wife. She gets angry when she doesn't come with. She loves it too.
Their portions are large, and the majority of their plates are under $10. When you and your wife come, is there dishes that you typically share? Do you think they're shareable portions, or?
I don't share with her. I get my own.
Probably smart.
No, I think she likes the salads.
What's your favorite dish here?
I like the beef shawarma wrap.
What about you? What do you like to get here?
I like the gyro.
The gyro. Now the food you're seeing tastes as good as it looks.
Like you're hungry,
Always.
you want something filling, you could find anything in the restaurants here. Vegetarian dishes, gluten-free dishes, meat dishes. So
There's something for everyone.
for everyone you could find here.
Their lentil soup, simply amazing.
It's no chicken stocks, no beef, any products.
This is incredible.
So here we use for this dish, we use basmati rice.
What I like about Mediterranean rice is that it's very moist. It's very delicious. It always has like a lemony, zesty taste to it.
Yes.
This is better than any one you're gonna find in any
we
store.
make the hummus here. We boil the garbanzo.
Everything's so good and light.
Yes.
It doesn't feel.
It's not heavy. I mean,
No.
it's very light. Most of our customers are repeat customers.
Yeah.
I mean, they're always here. Some of them every day.
Well, I'll be here tomorrow, so I'll be your repeat customer.
Yeah.
Now, before we left, I wanted to know what Albasha meant.
Albasha means like the wise man.
Oh.
It's like where people go to see, get advice on issues and stuff, and have a problem, solve a problem.
So you're the wise man that cooks.
Well, I don't know if
that makes the good food. I like
or
it.
just on the food wise.
Well, there you have it. If you're looking for a big lean meal that your trainer will approve of, Albasha Mediterranean Grill is a good option. That's your Cheap Eats Tip of the Week. I'm Maya Signs.
A toddler who can barely speak will eventually have to stand in front of a judge and possibly be removed from the country. That girl was separated from her dad at the border because he was arrested for re-entry of a removed alien. She's now with her uncle in Omaha. Senior reporter Jake Wazakowski continues his exclusive week-long look at this situation, digging into how often kids are dealing with deportation and if they're getting help.
This is Immigration Court in Omaha. This is where that 2-year-old girl I've been telling you about all week will be eventually for a deportation hearing. I wanted to come check it out and found out today that dozens of other kids in a similar situation, some without an attorney to represent them. On the Immigration Court docket are 25 names of juveniles from Guatemala, Honduras, and Mexico. I watched a 7-year-old second grader, both parents in Guatemala, answer a judge's questions. Many of the kids were missing school. Some of them didn't have an attorney to fight for them.
I think it's important that we represent kids, and I think that all kids deserve representation.
Ella Newell and Samantha Lowry with the UNL College of Law Immigration Clinic presented themselves on behalf of the kids without an attorney.
One of the girls today was doing the rosary as she was going through the hearing, and so you can see how scary this would be for someone so young in a different language, in a different country where it's not the same in any way, shape, or form.
To think that kids can understand the system and deal with the pressures of this system without representation it's moronic.
A couple of teenage sisters had to come from Des Moines for their hearing. The UNL Immigration Clinic is one of a number of attorneys who volunteer to represent the kids when they're scheduled to appear without someone.
And unfortunately, in the immigration system, since it's a civil system, not a criminal system, there's no constitutional right to state appointed counsel.
Newell and Lowry would like to see that changed.
A lot of these kids, when they come here, they face significant trauma, and so it's very important to have an attorney present, and it's something that should change. There should be an attorney mandated for every person that should come through the immigration court, especially for children.
Reporting from Abbott Drive and Avenue H East, Jake Wazakowski, 3 News Now.
We're told the system is so backed up, some minors are getting court dates 3 years from now. A local nonprofit is helping men of all ages change their lives through a special program. The Men of Bethany in America has impacted dozens of men in Omaha, and one of them shared his story of triumph and redemption with reporter Sydney Gray.
I saw myself becoming somebody that I didn't like no more.
Angel Diaz is a local barber. He'll graduate from the College of Hair Design in December. But it's taken over a year of consistency and self-reflection for him to get here.
I got addicted to some drugs, and I got really bad into it, and I was fed up with it. I was fed up with it, and one day on February 14th, 2018, I decided I was done.
He turned to the Open Door mission, hoping to redirect his life. Through them, Angel found a brotherhood thanks to the Men of Bethany.
There's programs out there, you just gotta look for them. They're not just gonna fall on your lap.
The Men of Bethany in America is a faith-based nonprofit helping men change their lives.
We like to consider ourselves more than just teachers and mentors, but a brotherhood of men that help men.
Men of all ages meet on a weekly basis either at the Open Door Mission, Omaha Street School, or the Douglas County Jail.
Our goal and our mission is to work with these guys to come up with how they could be better fathers, better husbands, understand their sons, understand their daughters, and to work towards that.
Angel says the organization changed his life at a time when he needed it most.
So I just had enough of the drugs, I just had I had enough of hurting people around me.
He completed the Men of Bethany's 36-week course. Angel says his heart changed, his mind changed, and he made plans to better his future.
I wanted to be a better parent, better father, a better brother, a better friend, and just like that, I was just tired of who I became, and there's help out there, you just gotta look for it.
Angel worked his way up from a rookie barber. Now his life and his skills are elevated. And he says those changes all started in a small group with other men in similar situations.
We want them to accept accountability and responsibility in their life.
And for men trying to make a change,
there's help out there for you guys, tomorrow there's programs out there for you, and you just gotta keep on pushing yourself.
In Omaha, Sydney Gray, 3 News Now.
The Men of Bethany tells us they are in need of more men volunteers. Anyone interested can visit their website, menofbethanyamerica.com.
Everybody in the Omaha area knows this story, but when you go to the East Coast and you go to the West Coast, we've never heard of the story.
It's a film 6 years in the making. Director Andrew Troy plans to tell the story of Chief Standing Bear, years after writing a screenplay based on a book by UNL professor Joe Starita. He was first inspired of the tale after Omaha native Warren Anzalon came to him after reading that book, titled I Am a Man.
So I thought, coupled with the story itself, there wasn't anything out there that was this powerful, and I just thought that this would be something that needed to be told.
Eventually, politicians got involved after Troy got word Congressman Jeff Fortenberry sponsored a bill that pursued a Chief Standing Bear National Trail. He reached out. Fortenberry loved the idea.
It's a story that all of Americans need to hear and that Nebraskans can certainly be proud of.
This announcement comes right after a statue of Chief Standing Bear was recently unveiled in D.C. Both Troy and Fortenberry hopes the movie, along with the statue, educates Americans on how back in 1879, Chief Standing Bear peacefully told a crowded courtroom that he is a man, winning his case, establishing legal rights for Native Americans.
Instead of fighting, instead of picking up the tomahawk or a rifle, he decided to find a means in court to find peaceful resolution.
The movie is set to be filmed in Nebraska, specifically Fort Omaha, including right here at the Crook House. While the heavy lifting is done, a few final steps need to be made before filming can begin. Once the movie is out, everybody involved hopes Americans will realize Chief Standing Bear's place in American history.
Chief Standing Bear never intended to be a civil rights leader, but that's what he became, because this is about the universal desire of justice and appealing to all human hearts.
In Omaha, John Kipper, 3 News Now.
And over the last 4 days, we brought you stories on how the rising awareness of concussions has changed youth and high school football. And there's one overlying theme. The entire series, there's so much we don't know.
Now over at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, they're trying to change that. That Center for Brain, Biology, and Behavior is on the forefront of concussion research. And as reporter John Kipper tells us, it's doing something no other university in the country is doing.
Football and soccer are the two sports with the highest rates of concussions. The UNL Center for Brain, Biology, and Behavior, or CB3, is honing in on that, studying the brain of every Husker that plays the two sports.
This center was built into Memorial Stadium for a reason.
CB3 director Kerry Savage says what they're doing inside East Stadium is unique.
This is the only program in the country that's scanning everyone.
Before they start their careers as Huskers, every football and women's soccer athlete gets an MRI scan. They then look at the structural and functional parts of the brain. That gives them a baseline for whenever the player gets a concussion at Nebraska. And if it happens, they come back to East Stadium for another scan, and then another, a few days later, as they continue to recover.
That we can then use to help doctors make decisions about how severe was this concussion and how likely are they to recover.
Well, this certainly helps the student athletes. There's a bigger picture. There are so many questions they want answered. Nobody knows why some people get CTE, a degenerative brain disease found in some NFL players, but also it's unclear why some athletes are back in a week and others take more time.
And we still have no ability to scan a person's brain and say something about his or her likely recovery. And that's what we hope to accomplish from this research program.
Now they're trying to break it down even more. The women's soccer team was out of the mix this year, not only because the sport is prone to concussions.
We want to be sure we study women as well, because women get concussions too. And there's a lot of data that suggests that men and women react differently to concussion and recover differently.
With both teams playing in the hyper-competitive Big Ten, the center can also serve as a recruiting tool, at least to the parents.
It doesn't mean we can answer every question, but we're using the state-of-the-art right now to help protect your son or daughter's health.
While UNL is on the cutting edge, they're not alone. They're in a pact with the Big Ten and Ivy League, collecting information on their athletes with concussions, hoping that gathering all that data gives them a clearer picture.
There's so much variability, but if you have hundreds or even thousands of concussions, you can start to answer some of those questions.
While it's not currently being done, the center doesn't want to stop collecting data when the athletes graduate. They'd eventually like them to come back.
In the long run, we would like to be able to bring people in after their football careers and study them as they age.
The center also hopes to study kids. Some think kids recover easier because of the plasticity of their brains, while others think it's worse for them because a concussion disrupts the connections a developing brain is still trying to make. Reporting in the studio, John Kipper, 3 News Now.
Well, I'm out here now with John Kipper after part 5 of his final piece on concussions and what football is doing to prevent them. John, you focused today a little bit on future, about science, about what they're doing down at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln.
Right.
It's amazing what the CB3 Institute is doing.
Right.
You mentioned right now that it's soccer and football that the Huskers are looking at. Do you think it's going to be more sports moving forward?
Yeah, well, I asked Dr. Savage this, and right now there is no current plans to do that. Right now they're just sticking with football and soccer, but in the future they are looking at gymnastics. You don't necessarily think of gymnastics as a sport where you see a lot of concussions, but that does certainly happen, and maybe eventually you may think wrestling would be added too, but one thing that they want to do, as we mentioned in the series, is tell the difference. Test men and women, see how their brains react differently, and gymnastics would also add more, obviously, women's brains to that, because there's obviously so many football players that they're already studying.
I'm just thinking about all the tumbling that they do and all the high ropes and all the trapeze, and there's a lot of times where you can have head impact, so it makes a lot of sense.
Certainly does.
And as you talked about, they want to look for more female athletes. What is the difference between looking at male brains versus female brains?
Well, I mean, as we mentioned, one of the themes of the series is there's so much we don't know. So they want to figure that out. But a few theories that Dr. Savage has is that they seemingly report different symptoms. And with those symptoms is they report them differently. Sometimes they won't report things. Men might report things that women might, and vice versa. So that's what they're going to figure out. But they're still so new into this process. As we mentioned, they just started studying women's soccer this year.
And when people think of concussion, they often think about CTE, the brain disease that a lot of high-profile NFL players in particular have been diagnosed with after death. Is the center looking at this disease at all?
It's tough for the center to do that. That's because in order to diagnose CTE, the person has to be dead. They physically have to take the brain out and study it that way. So it's not really a focus of the center right now. But eventually, the scientific community as a whole certainly wants to do that. The main thing they want to figure out is why some NFL players that have been hit in the head so many times have CTE, while others don't have any symptoms. The theory is it could be genetic, but They just don't know right now.
I mean, the facility is gorgeous for the CB3 down in Lincoln.
Right.
It's in Memorial Stadium. I'm sure a lot of fans have seen it, but this can't be cheap. How is this funded?
Well, right now it's funded by multiple ways. Right now the university system funds it to an extent through their research office. They also have a grant, so that keeps them going right now. But they mentioned they're pretty ambitious. They want to add, being able to study long-term effects as well. And again, that's going to cost more money. So they're trying to apply for national grants. Dr. Savage said they need funding in order to keep this going and to keep it going in the way that they want to.
Yeah, and you've done terrific work throughout the week telling these stories about local athletes in the area and its impact moving forward. What are your biggest takeaways following this series?
I have multiple of them. One of my main ones was tackling. That's what blew me away. Back in the day when I played football, they taught you to tackle forward. They wanted you to get the guy right here, essentially, right in front. Now they literally tell you to do the opposite. They want you to go from behind and kind of swoop them down, which definitely threw me off. Also, the helmets are vastly different than they used to be just back when I played in 2010. And finally, I eventually want to talk with some people with concussions and how that is affecting their lives right now.
Hey, well, there's a lot of research to still do moving forward. Thank you so much for your coverage, John. And you can find more about concussions, high school football, and their impact on the game overall. That's all on our website, 3newsnow.com.
Getting dental work can be scary for children, but a dentist office on wheels? Not so much.
I think it's funner on a bus
because this bus, called Flow Ride, is meant for children with TV screens on the ceiling and friendly faces.
And 3.
One World held the grand opening at Karen Western Elementary School.
It's it's welcoming. Not that dentists aren't friendly and welcoming, but I think just the environment of it's on wheels, first of all. The kids think it's cool, and I think that automatically kind of takes down some of that anxiety.
Super big like an alligator, honey.
One World says dental work can oftentimes be looked over or unaffordable for families.
What people don't realize, everyone talks about health care or medical care, but oral health disease is 5 times more common than asthma.
Raising awareness on how important dental work is starts at a young age. Skulkin says underserved children need that education the most.
Our building here is 75% in poverty.
Principal Mather is grateful the bus stopped at his school. So kids like Salvador and Nevaeh can get their cavities filled.
I like it because I can just walk in here.
The first steps to maintaining a smile that will last a lifetime. Reporting in Ralston, Corinne Hafuda, 3 News Now.
Thank you to the community for allowing us to be here.
Google is not only an internet company, it's a way of life. An odd word that can replace the word search. Now, Google's search for a new data center ends in Sarpy County. The company is building a $600 million facility near Highway 50 and Schramm Road.
Well, it's exciting to welcome Google to the Silicon Prairie. And of course, they're joining a bunch of other great technology companies that have come to Nebraska that are investing because of our people.
Google wants to make the world's information accessible and useful. The Sarpy County and Papillion areas proved useful for the new development.
Making sure we have developable land, making sure we have utility and power infrastructure, as well as workforce availability. And we found that Papillion had all those resources and talent in abundance.
It's creating hundreds of construction jobs and dozens of jobs when the center opens. OPPD started discussing infrastructure and power needs with Google about 6 years ago.
There's affordability, there's reliability, and certainly our development of our innovative and market-sensitive rates that we're providing for customers like Google who can take advantage of their renewable goals.
This is the 13th data center set to open for the tech giant. Another one is in Council Bluffs. Data centers that power the internet, one Google at a time.
As user demand continues to grow, we want to make sure that we have the capacity to meet that demand.
Google anticipates this new data center to be ready to open in about 18 to 24 months. Reporting in Sarpy County, Jake Wozakowski, 3 News Now.
Hey, good evening, Phil. So we spent some time at UNO's campus today, and an overwhelming number of students didn't want to discuss the matter, but one student told us she thinks it's time for everyone to start taking these complaints and alleged assaults seriously.
I mean, disgust is the first word that comes to mind.
Students we spoke to at UNO say they were shocked to learn a fellow student faces sexual assault charges.
Sexual assault is not something we should tolerate.
According to a police report, it happened last month during a party at the Sigma Phi Epsilon fraternity house. The fraternity's chapter is now disbanded.
I'm glad that they're being held accountable for their actions. It's awful that it happened in the first place, but I'm glad that it's been put to a stop, and hopefully we can move on from here and learn together how to be safer as a community, how to stand up when we hear something like this happening.
The fraternity's national office released a statement saying, following an investigation, the fraternity's National Board of Directors made the decision to disband the chapter effective immediately. The frat went on to say it immediately ceased the chapter's operations and launched an investigation. In this review, the fraternity verified that social event management policy violations had occurred and also found evidence of unacceptable traditions in the chapter experience. Robertson says attitudes towards sexual assault on college campuses needs to change.
Not just at UNO specifically, but as a whole, definitely. I think that now that we're in like the Me Too era and everything, and it's become a more well-known issue, groups are slowly starting to get more educated, but everything is still happening way more than it should be happening.
University officials also released a statement saying ensuring a safe and positive learning environment for all students is a top priority at UNO. We appreciate the responsiveness and partnership of Sigma Phi Epsilon throughout this process. Robertson says she hopes students will continue using their voice to stop assault.
If you feel afraid or threatened or angry, whatever your feelings may be, whether you support their disbandment or not, I think you should speak up because, democracy dies in darkness.
The university also told us it supports Sigma Phi Epsilon's determination in the matter. They also say they're still investigating several alleged violations of UNO's Student Code of Conduct. In studio, Sydney Gray, 3 News Now.
When you look at them side to side, you can't tell the difference.
We need to be able to tell the difference between marijuana and hemp. We're a forensic lab. We have to answer that legal question.
It took around 4 months, but the lab can now test to see whether the plant has enough THC to consider it marijuana. The lab used a method from the Drug Enforcement Administration and fit it to work with their lab and state laws. After they honed down the process with experiments, they have it down and are ready to go. They might be busy for a bit.
I think initially we might see an increase in our caseload because I'm assuming some county attorney's offices have been holding back some of their cases for testing. So maybe we'll get a slight influx here at the beginning. This one here is THC.
State law says any cannabis plant over 0.3% of THC is considered marijuana, while everything under is hemp. The lab is even kinder to potential defendants.
If it's determined to be less than 1% THC, we're going to report it as cannabis. Inconclusive hemp marijuana. We don't know if it's hemp or if it's marijuana. And we're kind of assuming that most county attorney's offices are not going to be prosecuting cases that are under 1%.
Even though you couldn't test for it, most county prosecutors were still proceeding on marijuana cases, including Sarpy County. County Attorney Lee Polkov is happy there's more clarity.
There's an idea that the whole system's falling apart. The whole enforcement system's falling apart. I don't want the citizens to believe that, and I don't want the potential defendants to believe that either.
With hemp legalized federally last year, much of the United States is going through the same process that Nebraska is.
But everybody across the country is spending their time trying to figure out how they're going to do it too.
While the lab serves 20 counties, they say they're willing to talk to any law enforcement that needs the service. Reporting in studio, John Kipper, 3 News Now.
Stay connected at 3newsnow.com.